Okay, thank you. Good morning, everyone. Hello, my name is Erika Luzzi, and I just graduated. I just finished my PhD at Jacobs University in Germany. I was invited today to talk a little bit about planetary geology as a possible career. So when I first approached planetary geology, I really didn't know anything about it because it's, I don't know, it's a small environment. So as a geology student, we don't often hear about it. So I want to shed some light on how to get involved with planetary geology, why it's so important to improve our knowledge on other planets, and when it might be the right moment to go into planetary geology. So how it started for me, as I said before, during my bachelor, I didn't know anything about planetary geology. And one day during a class, a professor showed us, it was not this picture, I couldn't retrieve the exact picture, but it was ripples on Mars. Now here you can see a cross-lamination that is an evidence of past paleo ripples. And this is on Mars. So in that moment, I felt like, okay, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. This is so fascinating. I mean, we're looking at a picture of another planet, of Mars, which is so far and no one was there so far. So it's kind of a pioneeristic work, if you want. So in that moment, I started to call random people. Like I would Google people, scientists, professors that were working on planetary geology, and I would just ask random questions because I really didn't know what things can you do on Mars. So of course, doing geology on Mars is not like doing geology on the field on Earth, where you go with your hammer, your compass, your lens, and you can touch the outcrop, take measures. You cannot go there, but you have huge possibilities. You have so many data sets. Now here on the right, I don't know if you can see. Wait. Okay. Here there are some examples of the data that we can collect on Mars. So there are rovers, of course. I'm sure you all know about Curiosity, Opportunity, and other rovers. There are landers. So they're sort of rovers, but they can't move. They just station in one place. And then we have orbiters. Orbiters probably produce the biggest amount of data because they orbit around the planet and they can collect data at a global scale from very different regions. And on board the orbiters, there is a variety of instruments. So you can have an instrument taking pictures, an altimeter for the topography. You can have a spectrometer to study the mineralogy. So really, we have so many different types of data that even though we cannot go there, there's still a lot of work that we can do from Earth. So after my bachelor, I started my master in exploration geology. So still, let's say, regular geology. And in that moment, I wondered that maybe the best moment to get into planetary geology was the master thesis, because you still need the training of the master, the general geology master, because, you know, you cannot, you want to avoid speculation. So you want to be prepared from a purely geological point of view. So I chose to do my master still in regular geology. And then my master thesis was in Germany, and it was about Mars. In particular, the data that I used were from the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter. And among all the instruments that it has on board, I particularly use the high-rise, high-resolution cameras that we will see in a while. They can take extraordinary images of the Martian surface. CTX, which is more for context, so the resolution is a bit lower, and spectral data. And the instrument is called CRISM. And this was my area for my master thesis. So there is this crater on Mars called Becquerel crater. And inside the crater, there is this quite enigmatic mound that you can see in this picture. And maybe you cannot appreciate it from here, but it's a very complex geological setting. So there is bedding, there are faults, radial faults, there are two different facies, there are many peculiar weird ridges. It was really mind-blowing for me at the time because I'd never seen something like this. So it was a challenge, and this is when I really felt in love with planetary geology. Now here, I just want to quickly show you what impressive things we can do with the data that we have. With my computer, okay, can you see it? So we can have a 3D view of any outcrop that we are studying, and this can certainly help with, geological reconstructions. And it also feels like you're there, and it gives you an idea of the scale and the relationships between different units. I think okay. So now I will make sort of list of all the different types of geology that we can do on Mars. Of course, geomorphology. So here in this image, you can see some dunes. I'm sure you can recognize that there are dunes. And there are actually two different types of dunes. So what a geomorphologist could do here, it could be to study the relationship between these two different sets. One has to be younger than the other one. And also the different mineralogy, because you can see that on the left, we have dunes with dark materials and on the right with light materials. So we have also change in mineralogy. And in this way, you can reconstruct the direction of the wind. You can reconstruct what changed to make these two dunes different. And this is just an example. There are so many things that a geomorphologist could do on Mars. There are mass wasting processes, there are dust devils, really, there are many things. Then, of course, you can study the mineralogy. As I said before, you can perform spectral analysis. This image in particular is from a paper that I did a couple of years, 1 year ago. And I found this area where this deposit that you can see like little green was occurring close to grabens. Now, these are not grabens as we intend them on Earth with an extensional component. They're volcanic grabens. And it's peculiar that this deposit was occurring right there. So I performed the spectral analysis. You can see on the right the spectra, and the spectrum of this deposit was consistent with smectite, which is a mineral that often is occurring in hydrothermal systems. So from this small analysis, well, it was not small, I can assure you, it took a while, but from this small figure, I realized that we were talking about an hydrothermal environment. And you might imagine that talking about hydrothermal systems on Mars is highly impacting because circulation of hot fluids could mean life, microbial life, of course, not dinosaurs. So it has very important implications. And then you can do structural geology also. Now here, I'm sure you can recognize a couple of faults. So congratulations, you just saw your first faults on Mars. I remember the day that I discovered these faults, I cried because it was like, okay, I'm looking at an image that probably no one saw before, and I just found a fault. So that's the pioneeristic feeling that I was talking about before. You're the first one to discover something. And then from these faults, you can reconstruct 3D models as well as you do on Earth. I don't know if you're familiar with Move, for example. It's a software that it's used mostly in the oil field for 3D modeling of the subsurface. And this is what I did. I reconstructed. It's it's elementary because we just have 3 layers and a fault, but it helps to have an idea of what's going on in the subsurface. You can do geological mapping as well as on Earth. Geological maps on Mars are a little bit different compared to those on Earth, but still you can map units, different units. You can map faults, crater rims, etc. It's a very challenging work because you have to understand the whole geological setting just from the images. You cannot go there with your hammer, as I said before. So what I listed so far was just about the surface of Mars, but you can actually study also the internal structure of Mars. Here, for example, we have Phillips et al. That in 2001 studied the gravity anomaly in the Tharsis region, which is a huge volcanic province where Olympus Mons occurs. Olympus Mons is a volcano 25 kilometers high. Can you imagine 25 kilometers high in a volcano? It's mind-blowing. And then you can also use the radar and study the subsurface. In this case, this is a very important work that led to the discovery of subsurface lake, liquid water lake on Mars in the polar region. So you can imagine all the implications also in this case. Now, of course, as well as on Earth, also Mars, we have to take into account time and space. So we have, let's say, on Earth, we know two different ways of dating a particular deposit, the relative dating or the absolute dating. The relative dating is you just study the relationship between the two units, and you say, okay, this has to be younger than this one. The absolute dating, you collect a sample and you perform some dating laboratory, and that's absolute. Now, on Mars, of course, we don't have absolute dating. But absolute dating was performed on the moon, samples collected on the moon during the Apollo program. So what we do is to study the statistic of the impact craters on the moon in that areas where we know the age of the deposits. And then if there are so many craters, I'm going to say it simple. If there are many craters, we infer that it has to be after the bombardment period. If it doesn't have craters, it's something more recent. So this is called crater counting, and it's a technique to date deposits. Also on Mars. Now, I'm a bit against it because on Mars, absolute dating was never performed. So I usually prefer to use relative dating. So you just observe the stratigraphic relationship between deposits. And I think it's more reliable. And then, of course, you also have different scales. Now, here, this colored sphere is Mars. It's a topography, polarized terrain. And this very small dot you can see on the right, you can really go into detail with the high-res images. They have a high resolution, and you can really see a small ripple, a small layer, anything. Of course, talking about scale, now I mostly talked about Mars, but all the things that I said can be extended to other planets of the solar system. For example, Venus, Mercury, or also the moons of Jupiter and Saturn are very interesting, and some of them have a potential for habitability. So that is something very interesting, but I think I would run out of time talking about that. So let's move on. First, before I said that geological maps are important, and they're important as well as on Earth, because they provide a basic knowledge of an area where you want to perform some analysis. For example, the first thing you do, you look for a geological map if someone performed this type of analysis. And that could be for a science investigation, but also if you want to explore the resources of that area, if you want to assess hazard and risk. For any use, geological maps are very, very important. And I was lucky because my PhD was half funded by PlanMap. PlanMap was, because now it's over, a European project that aimed to improve our database of geological maps of Mercury, Moon, and Mars. And this is an example of a geological map from the project. This is a geological map of Mercury. So you really have to be careful. You can see a lot of dotted lines that are inferred. And it's a huge work, you know, to infer something on another planet, because you can't go there. So you have to really take all the evidence, gather all the evidence that you have, and really, really think about it and explore all the possibilities. The other half of my PhD was funded by ESA in the frame of the Analog 1 mission. And so we were in Lanzarote, in the Canary Islands, and we also, apart from the terrestrial analog work, I don't know why the screen is cut, but it's okay. So we also had ESA astronauts having geological training, because, you know, they're not geologists, and they need to know at least the basic skills of field work. So this has been a very intense experience. Lanzarote is a volcanic island, so it has a lot in common with other planets, with Mars, with the Moon especially. So we performed a variety of geological analyses to be compared to the Moon. And then another terrestrial analog fieldwork that I performed just recently was in Botswana and in Makgadikgadipan, where we performed electrical tomography to study the subsurface and see if we could find some faults where maybe water was circulating and could have contributed to the deposition of these evaporites and to the hydrogeological cycle in general. So terrestrial analogs are also a huge part of planetary geology, because, you know, mostly planetary geology is done on your computer in your office. You download the data, you process the data, you visualize the data, and then you have your results. But the terrestrial analogs are what can bring you to the field again. So it's also very important because we cannot go on that planet, but we can study something that's here on Earth that is similar, and we can compare it. So it's also very important because we can have some sort of truth by studying the analog on Earth. Now, I don't know if I ran out of time. Anyway, if you found planetary geology fascinating, if you think that it might be your path, please ask me your questions or write. This is my email address. And before I leave you, I just want to quickly show you something that you can play around and just explore Mars. So on this website, this is the website of the high resolution images on Mars. And you can just go here and search and, I don't know, write dunes, for example, and you have a variety of areas, and you can just open one. There are many formats. The DP2 can go on GIS, but for now we will just open the JPEG. And here you are, you're on Mars. So if you're curious to take a look and see if maybe you see something and you're the first one to do so, please go to the HiRes website and just have fun. And with this, I finished my presentation.